And this scene, it made me want to cry in both book and movie because, like, so yeah, has there ever been just like a more deplorable character ever written than I don't think so. I hated him so much. Hello, and thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I'm talking about Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin, published in 1967, and I'm comparing it with the movie directed by Roman Polanski, released in 1968. And I covered this last season of American Horror Story, which was an adaptation of the book Delicate Condition, and Delicate Condition takes a lot of inspiration from Rosemary's Baby, and I had seen the movie Rosemary's Baby before, and so I knew the basic gist of it, but I had forgotten a lot of the details. And so now returning to Rosemary's Baby, it makes me realize how much Delicate Condition took inspiration from with Rosemary's Baby, but it actually just made me love Delicate Condition all the more because she did it in such a great way, because it's not like she was stealing ideas from Rosemary's Baby and hoping nobody notices. Like, no, like she clearly pays homage to Rosemary's Baby in a very obvious way, and yet she puts her own spin on the story. And so yeah, it just made me love Delicate Condition all the more. And so I do want to plug that book. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, you might think you know where it's going based on Rosemary's Baby and other stories like that. But again, Delicate Condition can stand on its own because she does her own thing with the story. And yeah, I really loved that one, and I would definitely recommend it. But then I also wanted to mention, before we get into Rosemary's Baby, I wanted to mention Ana Luisa, which is a jewelry company I have partnered with. I'm so excited to be working with them. I am currently wearing these earrings, and these ones have just like a quiet, simple elegance to them, you know? And so they have some pieces like this, but then they have other pieces that make more of a bold statement. And I do love both styles of jewelry depending on the vibe I am going for. But yeah, I highly recommend you check them out. I will link to them in my description, and it is an affiliate link, so it does benefit me if you use that link in particular to order your jewelry. But yeah, their jewelry is just very high quality, very beautiful. And then their products and packaging are also carbon neutral, which is also nice to support a company that cares about the environment, you know? So yeah, I would highly recommend Ana Luisa. Again, they are linked in my description, so click that link and shop some of their jewelry for yourself. But to move on to Rosemary's Baby, having a spoiler-free section, I don't know if there's a lot of point in that, because I feel like this story is so well known and everybody knows what happens, you know, because it's just so iconic, and there's been so many spin-offs and remakes and sequels and reboots, and there will even be a new prequel movie coming out called Apartment 7A, which will be released later this month. So all these years later, we're still taking inspiration from Rosemary's Baby. You know, even Delicate Condition, which I just mentioned, takes a lot of inspiration from Rosemary's Baby, even though it's not a direct adaptation. And Apartment 7A isn't a direct adaptation either. It's just a prequel based on this original book. But yeah, it's just so iconic. And so I am so happy to finally be covering it, because I just loved both so much. It was my first time reading the book, and it was fantastic, both book and movie. They are just so atmospheric and unsettling and creepy and eerie, and they're just slowly building this suspense where you know something is wrong. And then there is one scene in particular in the movie that was so disturbing and upsetting that the day I watched this movie, I had a hard time going to sleep that night, because I was just lying in bed and I couldn't fall asleep because I just kept thinking of this scene, because it was just so upsetting and so horrifying. But this book and movie, it's not horrifying in like the horror, gore, frightening images kind of a way. It's horrifying in just this unsettling way that just kind of like creeps into you, you know, and then you're just like, oh, like it's just, yeah, just very disturbing, even though it's not gory at all. And I think the first time I watched this, like I said, it was like over 10 years ago. And at the time, I think I preferred horror movies that were more obvious and maybe more gory, I guess, because I remember feeling like this movie wasn't as scary as I had hoped it would be. And yet now, watching it over 10 years later, and now maybe my taste has matured a bit, I don't know, but I was like, wow, this is incredibly effective, and it's incredibly scary and unsettling and horrifying, and it was scary enough for me this time around, needless to say. But anyway, so I would highly recommend both, but obviously, you know, if you're a horror fan, this is a must-see, a must-read. If you're not a fan of the horror genre, then you should probably skip this one because, yeah, it's very upsetting. Oh, but then also to talk about Apartment 7A real quick, I do plan on watching that movie and then I'll make a follow-up video reviewing it since it is timely, right? Since I have this video coming out. So I do plan on watching it. However, there is the possibility it might be too creepy for me. So if I'm not able to make it through the movie, I obviously won't make a review video for it. So if you follow me on Instagram, I will update you on how that viewing goes. But as of right now, I am planning on watching it and planning on reviewing it. So unless I get too scared, that video will be coming out soon after the movie's release. It is a straight to streaming movie, so that also has me hesitant. Like, they must not have much confidence in it if they're not even releasing it in theaters, you know? But anyway, I do want to give it a shot. And yeah, from here on out, we will get into the details of Rosemary's Baby, which means there will be spoilers going forward. So this book and movie are incredibly similar. Like, this is one of the most faithful adaptations I have ever covered here on Why the Book Wins. And it was such a faithful adaptation that it actually inspired me to begin a list of the most faithful adaptations that I have covered for Why the Book Wins, and I think that will be another video I make sometime in the future where I go over those movies. So I don't know when that video, I don't know when I'll be making it, but at some point in the future, you will see a video about the most faithful adaptations, and Rosemary's Baby will definitely be top of the list because there are very few changes from book to movie. And not only are there not many changes, but so much of the movie just comes verbatim exactly from the book. Like, so much dialogue verbatim from the book, so many mannerisms and details and descriptions, like they're all exactly from the book. So there's like a couple differences to talk about, and the only substantial difference is in regards to the ending because the book has more of a concrete ending than the movie does. But aside from that, yeah, this is a very faithful movie. But the basic story, for those who don't know, we have Rosemary and Guy, who are a married couple who move into this apartment building called the Bramford, which is very famous or infamous, depending on where you stand. And she and Guy get to know the fellow tenants, and Guy in particular becomes very close to their neighbors, Minnie and Roman Castevet. And Rosemary soon becomes pregnant, and then she is just like smothered by Minnie because she is constantly coming over and she's always giving her food and things to eat and drink. And she's just like smothering Rosemary essentially with like how much she cares about her and how much she is trying to help out. And Rosemary's pregnancy is incredibly painful at the start. However, like around the halfway point, the pain just disappears and the rest of the pregnancy goes well up until the final month, because in her last month of pregnancy, she starts to suspect that the neighbors, Minnie and Roman, as well as other tenants in this apartment building, as well as her husband Guy, she suspects that all of them are part of a witch coven who are trying to get her baby to use in their rituals. And so she starts to be suspicious and worry about all of this, but ultimately drama happens and then she ends up giving birth in her apartment. However, when she comes to, she is told that the baby had died, but she hears crying in another apartment. And so one night she sneaks out and goes to this apartment and she sees that her baby is alive. And while yes, she was right, and this is a witch coven, she was wrong that they wanted her baby to use in their rituals, because in fact, her baby is the son of the devil and they are worshiping him. And of course, Rosemary is in horror when she finds this out. However, as you know, the minutes pass, she still can't help but have motherly feelings for this baby. But to talk about when she gets pregnant, so Guy, after he meets the Castevets, he decides that he is ready to have kids with Rosemary. Prior to this, especially in the book, we know that he was on the fence as far as having children. But then suddenly he's like, yeah, let's do it. I'm ready. And so they see what day Rosemary begins to ovulate and they plan a little date night at home. And while they are eating dinner at home, Minnie stops by with some chocolate mousse, or chocolate mouse as she calls it, and she gives it to both of them. And Rosemary eats like a couple bites, but she says it tastes weird, so she throws the rest out. But we find out that the mousse had a drug in it, which would have knocked her out, made her unconscious. But because she doesn't eat all of it, she ends up still having a hazy memory of this night, but she just assumes it must be a dream. But what she remembers in this like hazy dream state is that Guy undresses her and then he carries her to the Castevets' apartment. And then while there, she is lying in their bed surrounded by different, tenants of this building, when then she thinks Guy is having sex with her. But in the book specifically, she feels like Guy must be wearing a suit because he feels weird. But we, and she as well, of course, eventually realized that this was not Guy and it was not even a man at all, but that she was being raped by the literal devil. And when she wakes up the next morning, she has scratches on her, and then Guy is quick to be like, oh, sorry, that was me. That was my nails. Like, we had sex last night and I got a little carried away. And she's like, wait, what? Like, we had sex? But like, I was unconscious because she fainted. And so he had helped her to bed. And she was like, wait, what? Like, I was unconscious and you still had sex with me? And he's like, hey, like, it was baby night. I didn't want to miss it. And she's obviously very disturbed by this, that he would do that when she wasn't even aware. And she tells him like, oh, like, I'd had a dream last night that I was raped. But he's like, oh, like, yeah, it was just me, essentially. And yeah, she's very upset that Guy would do this, of course. And we hear more about it in the book. And in the book, she even leaves for a few days. And in the book, we know they've only been married for like a year. And so while she is away for a few days, she's just kind of like rethinking the whole marriage. But ultimately, she ends up missing Guy and she returns home and they make amends. But yeah, her leaving was not in the movie. That was just in the book. But she does end up becoming pregnant from this night. However, once she's pregnant, Guy doesn't have much interest in like talking about the baby, or when she wants him to touch her belly to feel it move, he's just like, ooh, like, no, I don't want to. And obviously we realize afterwards that he is weird about it because he knows that he is not the father and that instead he provided Rosemary's body to be used by the literal devil. But something that also is not in the movie is that the night this happens, like during that day, she had gotten a call from her sister, and she is kind of estranged from all of her family because they were strict Catholics, and then she married Guy, who was a non-Catholic, and so her family stopped talking to her. And so her sister calls her, which is very unexpected, and the sister tells her, like, I just had a feeling that, like, something was wrong and that you were in danger. And so I just wanted to call and see how you're doing. And, you know, she and Rosemary chat. And then she also asks Rosemary, like, just don't go out tonight, okay? Because I just feel like something bad is going to happen. And Rosemary assures her, like, oh, we're just having a date night in, like, don't worry. And then, of course, that night is when the incident happens. And yeah, her sister giving her a phone call was not in the movie. But then, yeah, like I said, the first half of Rosemary's pregnancy, she just has this pain that just grows and grows, and it just kind of takes over. And she also loses a ton of weight. The scale at the doctor's office says she has lost 3 pounds. But in the book, she talks about how the scale at home has said she has lost more weight. But Guy is like, oh, this scale is faulty, and so he throws it away. But a few months in, she decides to have a party. And at this point, again, she's just feeling smothered by Minnie. And so she's like, I want to have a party with the people we were friends with before we moved into this apartment. Like, I do not want any of the fellow tenants at this party. And a lot of the tenants are older. So she's like, you have to be under 60 to come to this party. And so, yeah, she hosts this party and a lot of her friends come over. And there is a scene when a number of her girlfriends are in the kitchen with her because they see how sickly she looks, right? Like when she mentions not feeling well or her weight loss to Guy or Minnie or Roman, they all dismiss her, being like, oh, you look fine. Like, don't worry, you'll gain weight soon enough. Like, it's no big deal. You look great. But these friends of hers can see that she does not look good. And they know she's pregnant. And so they are with her in the kitchen and she starts breaking down crying, telling them like about this pain she has been in and how her doctor is so dismissive of it. And Guy even tries to come in and break this up, but one of the women like stands against the door to block him from coming in. And so it's just this fantastic scene where they are gathering around her being like, this pain is not normal. And if your doctor is telling you it is normal, something's wrong with him. Like, he's a nut. You need to get a second opinion. Like, you need to go see someone else and see what they say, because pain is a sign that something is wrong and clearly you are not well. And this scene, it made me want to cry in both book and movie, because like, you are put in Rosemary's shoes where you're just in such pain and misery and no one is validating your feelings, right? Your own husband, these other people in your life, your own doctor, they're all telling you it's nothing and it's fine, it'll pass, whatever, you'll stop making a big deal about this. And so when she finally has people who genuinely care about her and who are validating her feelings and who are wanting to help her, like, it was just such a fantastic scene, because I just felt so grateful to these women for finally, like, someone is finally there to help Rosemary out, you know? And it's so tragic too, because ultimately we know that it's to no avail. But yeah, it was just such a great scene in both book and movie, and I absolutely loved it, even though at the same time it's heartbreaking for so many reasons. But anyway, yeah, in that moment, I just felt such gratitude to these women who were there trying to help Rosemary, and again, just validating her feelings, because everybody else is gaslighting her. And finally, she has people being like, something's wrong, you know? But anyway, after the party, she tells Guy this, being like, I want to go to a different doctor and get a second opinion. But Guy is so bothered, and he's like, that's so disrespectful to our current doctor. By the way, her current doctor is one that Minnie and Roman recommended, and he is part of this coven as well. So that is why he is being so dismissive. And he also tries to control the information, and he tells Rosemary, like, do not talk to other women about their pregnancies, because then, you know, like every pregnancy is different. And the more people you talk to, like you're just getting false information. So don't talk to anybody except me. And so she tells this to the other women, saying like, oh, he told me every pregnancy is different and I shouldn't talk to other women. And the women are like, what? Like, no, like, yeah, every pregnancy is different, but this is not okay. Something is wrong. But anyway, so her doctor is gaslighting her like everybody else. And so she's telling Guy that she wants a second opinion, and this turns into this big argument. However, during the argument, suddenly Rosemary stops because she's like, the pain, just like that, is vanished. And now suddenly, like, I feel fine. And so after this, she no longer feels the need to see another doctor because now the pain is gone. So she's like, well, I guess I'll stick with the doctor I have because now I feel great. And I do want to talk about Guy because, wow, what a horrible, horrible person who was so infuriating. And he is an actor in both book and movie. And basically, we find out that he made a deal with this coven that they would help him progress in his career if he offered them Rosemary's body to be used as a vessel to carry this child, you know? And they do end up helping him. And we see the start of this because he was up for a part in a play, but someone else gets the part. However, the man who got the part goes blind out of nowhere. And so then the part is then offered to Guy. And so, yeah, then he allows Rosemary's body to be used and defiled in this horrific way. And then after that, he goes on to gaslight her, and he's constantly manipulating her and lies to her. And he makes her feel like she is delusional or hysterical, and just the way he treats her. It's just so terrible. And I hated him so much. But I will say in the movie, they did a good job though, because before he meets the Castevets, I did kind of like the dynamic between he and Rosemary. Like you could see that they were just kind of silly and had fun together. But we only see that for like 5 or 10 minutes, you know, more than 5, I guess maybe 10 minutes or something, before suddenly we see that he has gone to the dark side and he is just a horrible person. And he also is just converted to the witches so quickly. Like after the first meal with them, he and Roman go off and talk together. And like that's all it took. And suddenly he was on board, because then very soon after, not that night, but very soon after that, suddenly he tells Rosemary, like, I'm ready to have kids, let's do it. And so I'm just like, wow, it did not take much for him at all to be convinced in order to do this to his wife. But if I am trying to be nice to Guy, I will say that when they go to have dinner at the Castevets' house, they eat dessert, and Rosemary talks about how the dessert tasted weird. And I don't think she even finishes one piece, but Guy has 2 portions of this dessert. And so I wonder if there was something in the dessert that impacted their frame of mind. And so maybe because he had 2 helpings, maybe he had more of this drug, which caused him to be more convinced to, you know, betray his wife in this way. So we don't find out for sure. That could just be me making stuff up, but I did wonder that. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on that down below in the comments. But in the very end, after Rosemary realizes the truth, she is, you know, sitting off away from everybody, just like in shock and horrified, when Guy comes up to her and he says, they promised me you wouldn't be hurt, and you haven't been really. I mean, suppose you'd had a baby and lost it. Wouldn't it be the same? And to this, Rosemary wisely just spits in his face. So yeah, has there ever been just like a more deplorable character ever written than Guy Woodhouse? I don't think so. I hated him so much. But to talk about actually a decent man in this movie and book, and that is Hutch. So Hutch is an older friend of both Rosemary and Guy, and he tries to talk them out of moving into the Branford because he knows its history, and he tells them they shouldn't move there, but they do anyway. And then when Rosemary is pregnant, he comes to visit and he sees how horrible she looks. She's very gaunt, she's lost weight. And also while he is at her apartment, Roman comes over. And so he and Roman interact, and Roman can see that Hutch is, you know, he's got a keen eye and he's noticing that things aren't making sense. And he's very suspicious of just this whole thing going on. And so Roman then becomes suspicious of Hutch, right? And then, after this meetup with Hutch, Hutch later calls her that night and he's like, hey, I have something I want to talk to you about tomorrow morning. And she's like, yeah, let's meet. And after she hangs up, Guy asks, oh, what did Hutch want? And so she tells him that he wants to meet her in the morning. And then what do you know? Guy suddenly has a craving for ice cream and he leaves the apartment. And we know that he actually goes to talk to Roman and Minnie. And he tells them, Hutch, he's up to something. And so then the witches cause Hutch to go into a coma that very night. And so he does not meet up with Rosemary. She goes to see him and he never shows. And he is in a coma for the rest of the story. And in the book, when he is in the hospital, Rosemary will go visit him while he is in a coma. But once the pain stops and she feels better, she stops going to see Hutch. And this is not in the movie. In the movie, she doesn't visit him in the hospital. But over time, she eventually gets a phone call saying that Hutch had officially died. And so then she goes to his funeral. And at his funeral, she meets a woman who had been close to Hutch. And this woman tells her, before Hutch died, he gained consciousness just enough to tell the nurse that he had a book that he needed to give to you. And he was very adamant, this was so important. And so then she gives this book to Rosemary from Hutch. And the book is all about witches. And so she finds out just different things. She has this necklace charm that Minnie had given to her. And it's a good luck charm, but it has some sort of fungus inside. And from this book, she finds out that it is a fungus that covens will use for whatever thing. And then also a man who used to live in the Bramford was named Adrian. And he had been a very infamous witch. And she finds out that Adrian was the father of Roman. So Roman is the descendant of this person. And she also reads that they use babies for different rituals. So she's like, they want my baby. I need to protect it because they're going to try to take it after it's born. And so at this point, she does not suspect Guy. And so she tells Guy about this and she shows him the book. But Guy, of course, he ends up throwing the book away because he doesn't want Rosemary learning any more than she already has. But speaking of that charm that she wears, early on when they first moved into the Bramford, she meets a woman named Terry. And Terry is wearing this charm. And she tells her that Minnie had given it to her. And she tells her that she had been a former drug addict, living on the streets when Minnie and Roman found her, and they have rehabilitated her. And now she lives with them and they've been treating her so good and she's so grateful to them. And then later, very soon after this, maybe the same night or maybe a few nights later, they are walking home and they find out that she had committed suicide from jumping from the apartment window. And then we find out in this weird dreamlike state Rosemary is in, she overhears a conversation where we find out that Terry had been their original choice, but they must have told Terry the plan and Terry didn't want to be part of it. And so either she told them she didn't want to be part of it and so they killed her and made it look like suicide, or she told them she didn't want to be part of it and she was so upset by everything that then maybe she really did commit suicide because it was just that upsetting for her. So I'm not sure if it was murder or suicide. I feel like it could have potentially been either one, but we do know that she had been the original choice. But then to talk about the ending, because I said the book and movie have slightly different endings, just very slightly. But in both, Rosemary finds out the truth. And again, she is horrified. How many times have I used that word in this video? I've said it so many times. But anyway, she is very upset about all of this. And in the book, we get her thoughts and she is thinking I need to kill that baby. And then afterwards, I'll kill myself. But then she's like, well, I can't do that though. It's a baby. I can't kill it. But honestly, your emotions, your typical morals and ethics or whatever, they do not apply in this situation. We're talking about the devil, okay? But anyway, she's like, oh, it's a baby. I can't do that. And so she's like, well, I need to talk to the Pope. The Catholic Church, they would know how to handle this. And yet, while she is thinking this, ultimately, a woman is rocking the bassinet, but Rosemary is like, you're rocking it too fast. And so she goes up there and Roman is encouraging her, yes, be a mother to the baby. And so she goes up and she starts rocking it in a, slower way. And in the book, she then starts talking to the baby, cooing and, saying little baby talk to it. And so everybody in the room is quiet, just watching her. And then one of them say, "Hail Adrian," because they want the baby to be named Adrian. But she tells them his name is Andrew and I will not budge on that. And so then they start saying "Hail Andrew" as well as "Hail Rosemary." And that is how the book ends. And so it seems that Rosemary, by saying his name is Andrew and I won't budge on that, it's her taking on the mantle okay, I will raise this child despite what he is. And in the book, we also know based on her thoughts, she's like, well, he is half me. And so maybe the half that is me, maybe there's some good in him and maybe I can cultivate that if I raise him. So she's also thinking in that way. But yeah, she has decided to raise this demon baby. And so in the end, they're saying like hail Rosemary as well. Whereas in the movie, we have Roman encouraging her to be a mother to this baby. And we do see her rock the bassinet, but we don't get her thoughts and she doesn't say anything. We just see her expression as she is looking at the baby. And so it is a bit more ambiguous, but we can kind of assume that, like the book, her motherly instincts are kicking in despite the situation. And then I did want to talk about religion because that does factor into this book and movie, which the book I feel like has so many different things going on that if I gave this a reread, I would pick up on other things because they also talk about politics too. But for example, the Pope had been in New York the day that her sister had called Rosemary to warn her that something was wrong. And she asks Rosemary, like, oh, are you going to go see the Pope? And Rosemary is like, no, like, I'm just watching on TV. And the sister is like, what? Like, how can you not go see the Pope? And she is like so shocked and disappointed that Rosemary doesn't care about seeing the Pope in person, And then also when they have dinner with the Castevets talk insultingly about the Pope. And Rosemary is bothered by this and they like notice that she's upset. And she's like, yeah, I mean, I'm not religious anymore, but I was still raised to respect the Pope. So yeah, it makes me a little uncomfortable when you talk about him in that way. But then we also have a part in both book and movie when she is at a doctor's office and she picks up a magazine and the title of it is like, Is God Dead? And then also in the very end, after she has seen the baby, she is saying like, oh God. And then they tell her like, stop saying that, like God is dead. And then of course, the way the baby is treated is very similar to the story of Jesus, right? We even have people coming from other countries, coming from afar, bearing gifts for the baby. And then Rosemary, her name isn't that different from Mary, right? The Virgin Mary, which again is interesting because Mary, of course, was a virgin. Whereas here we hear them say how the only qualifications for the mother is that she be a female who can carry a baby and that she not be a virgin. So I thought that was kind of funny. But then before I get to book versus movie, I feel like I need to address the elephant in the room of sorts, which is Roman Polanski. And normally I try to separate the art from the artist, right? And so if someone is controversial, I won't even address any controversy with them because I'm like, that's so separate. Like, I don't need to talk about that when talking about this book and movie, So yeah, generally I separate the art from the artist. But in this case, I feel like I just have to mention him because he directed this movie in 1968. And then in 1977, he drugged and raped a 13-year-old. But to prevent being tried for this crime, he then fled the US, and that is why he lives in Europe. And if that's not bad enough, he also still makes movies. Like, there are still big name actors who want to work with him, and he has been making movies still despite all of this. And so I don't know how anyone could want to be affiliated with him in any way after that. But yeah, he still made movies long after. But then also what makes it so upsetting is the fact that someone being drugged and taken advantage of is what happens in Rosemary's Baby, And so he films this scene where that happens. And then he himself did that 10 years later, minus the devil aspect of it. And so it's hard not to separate that when talking about Rosemary's Baby because it's kind of a parallel we have there. And so it does kind of, I don't know, it makes me feel weird about this movie in certain ways, even though the movie is, of course, so well done. And yet at the same time, like, how can you not, right? It's hard to separate the two when it comes to this one. So anyway, I felt like I needed to address that. But when it comes to book versus movie, yeah, this movie, the performances are amazing for one. Everybody is perfect. And Mia Farrow, she's in basically like every scene. I'm trying to think if there's a scene without her, and I don't think there is. I think she's in every scene. And so this really did rest on her shoulders, and she is incredible. Like, I loved her so much. But then everyone, the supporting cast is also crucial, and they were fantastic. And then, yeah, just the movie itself is just incredible, and I highly recommend it. And the direction, the camera work, it's all amazing. But even so, I kind of want to say that the book wins because the movie doesn't improve upon the book. The movie is just an incredibly faithful adaptation of an already fantastic book. And like I said, so much is just verbatim right from the book. Like, the movie doesn't add anything of its own. aside from just the visual aspect, of course, which is huge and it is very important, and those performances are key. So I don't want to downplay the work that goes into adapting a fantastic book, because there's other movies that maybe are a faithful adaptation and yet they're still not a very good movie. So I don't want to downplay the movie. And yet at the same time, yeah, like everything just came right from the book, and it's just so incredibly similar. And then also the Roman Polanski stuff, I'm sorry, I can't not connect it with this movie, and so there's that too. And so ultimately I will say the book wins, with the caveat being that this movie is fantastic. If you're a horror fan, if you're a cinephile who is okay with horror movies, like this is one you have to see because it really is incredible. And yeah, so I highly recommend both. Ultimately, I also highly recommend Ana Luisa. Make sure you use that link down below in the description and check out their jewelry. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Even now, it's basically a tie. Like, I gave this book 5 stars. I think I gave the movie 4.5, but honestly, the movie really is a 5-star movie, I think. So they're both just incredible. So it's hard to say. I don't know. I'll still say the book wins, but it's very, very close because the movie's amazing. But yeah, anyway, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If you've read this book and seen the movie, let me know which one you think wins. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And then also I wanted to mention that Ira Levin did write a sequel. He wrote it like in the 90s, so a long time after. So if you have read that, let me know if it is worth checking out. I loved the book, so I am tempted to read the sequel, but I didn't read good things about it. But if you have read it and you think it's worth reading, let me know down below in the comments. And yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.